Hello and welcome. I can't see any screen there. Is my screen there? Yeah, there we are. Hello. Welcome to another live stream. I've gone from doing no live streams to two in the same week. But I want to talk about this topic. I'll squinch this out as its own video after the live stream. I think I'm just testing out a couple of things in this stream. So if you do have a question, you can put it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it. I'm testing out times. What's the best time to do the stream? This is a great time for me, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's most of the viewership, the people are in the UK and the US, and I know it's probably 2 a.m. for you or maybe 3 a.m. So welcome everyone who's here, and the purpose of this is really just to go through this topic that I wanted to go through, and if people do jump in with a question, that's totally fine. I'll answer those questions. So because New Year's happening right now, I want to talk about 3 things that you must do no matter what kind of diet you choose. So these, if you want to follow a Chinese medicine philosophy, if you want your diet to be healthy in Chinese medicine, of course, these are not the only 3 things, but this will bring you closer to health. So I'm experimenting with my little iPad writer here. So hopefully you can see this well. And it's not anything hard. It shouldn't be a hardship, but it may be quite different to what you would expect in some diets. But I'm sure that no matter what diet you do, you can incorporate these 3 things into it. And in this video now, I'm going to go through what they are and how to do that, how that might look in certain diets. Okay, so the first thing is, the 3 things are: eat mostly warm, moist, and cooked. So if your diet can incorporate these things, it's great, it's good, it's perfect, it's on its way to being a healthy diet in Chinese medicine. Things that are considered unhealthy on the other side are just the opposite of that. So easy, right? Cold, dry, and raw. As best as I can, I want to make Chinese medicine easy to understand so that this is saying it's not a good bit rate. I'm not sure. I've adjusted all my settings so that I could record this stream. So I hope it's working all right. It says it's very low. So anyway, we'll see what happens. I'll watch it at the end and see whether it looks good or not. Hopefully you can hear me properly. It's not lagging crazily, but I have adjusted a whole bunch of settings so that I can kind of incorporate this iPad scenario with my speaking. So anyway, what we want to do is have mostly warm, mostly cooked, and mostly raw. Mostly warm, mostly cooked, and mostly moist kinds of foods in our diet. And that would ensure that you're towards what Chinese medicine would consider healthy. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move towards health. Chinese medicine diet therapy is probably the most lenient out of all the diet advice, in terms of you've got a lot of room to have that balance and have I guess, and that's another way to put it, and not balance could be considered room. But what we want to try to do with our diet is kind of move from wherever you are now into a state of better health, right? So you might be already at the state of better health, and then you wouldn't need to be watching this video, or maybe you're just confirming that what you're already doing is great. But if you've got symptoms that aren't, you've got symptoms of digestive dyshealth. So these are things like bloating, gassy, like nausea. That's like feeling sick, feeling nausea is like, again, a spectrum of low appetite, not feeling like you want to eat, right to the point of like not being able to put any food in you, and then the worst of that would be vomiting. So nausea and vomiting, like actually throwing food up, not being able to keep any food down. and then the next part, so this is all sort of maybe the upper part. It could be up here in your epigastric area, could be tight, could be, feeling painful even. And then your bowels are going to be affected. So we'll just put like disharmony. It could be constipated. It could be too hard to go, not going regularly. So we might talk about that in this video. What is a regular bowel movement? What's a good bowel movement? Everyone loves to chat about a bowel movement. But I want to come to this. These are the 3 things that you must do no matter what your diet. And how would you do these? How does this incorporate into it? So your stomach in Chinese medicine is depicted as what we would say the cooking pot on the stove. Okay, that's a pot. That's my best version of drawing a pot. And the spleen energy is depicted as the fire below the pot. And these two together kind of form... Oh, we won't put fire there. I've just drawn fire. I'll just put spleen. So spleen and stomach, right? Now these two together form what we would call... someone's been playing around with my iPad and taking out all the colours I use. My nephew. This is the earth element. Right, now I'm just working this. This is a test run, so I can see that's not fitting on the page. Earth, right? So in Chinese medicine, you have 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. So what we're trying to do with our diet, no matter what diet you follow, if you follow a vegetarian diet, a vegan diet, a carnivore diet, the Mediterranean diet, even if you think, oh, my diet's unhealthy, I'd like to try to be a bit more healthy, I want to work on this, I feel like I've got dampness, I've been told I've got spleen qi deficiency, been told I've got yang deficiency. No matter what you do, now there are better things, there are more things you can do, but no matter what you do, you should adhere to these things because that supports that earth. So the more we can support it, the better it's going to function, and the better it functions, then the better energy you get out of your life. So the concept of digestion in Chinese medicine is that whatever you put into this stomach, the net gain is more than what you lose by the process of actually doing it. So everything you put into your body takes up energy. So I want to try to keep this video to these things so that it makes it easy for you to start with something. But again, I'm going to reiterate, there's better things you can do. So there's some diets that are better than others, and there's some diets that are worse than others. But no matter what you do, the food should be warm, the food should be moist, and the food should be cooked. So your stomach likes that. Your spleen likes that. It doesn't like cold, dry, and raw. When you put cold, dry, and raw foods in it, it really hurts it. It makes it harder. It's working so hard. As people are jumping in here, if you are, I'm wondering whether the stream rate's right or whatever, because I had to change a whole bunch of settings here. So if people want to put a comment there, they can about it. Maybe I'll just check it myself. Oh, now this is running out of battery. It's life, isn't it? Everything's running out of... All my devices are running out of battery today. I've got something got my iPad running on the charge and everything like that. I just want to see whether this is coming out at all. Because YouTube just keeps giving me this warning sign here saying something's not right, but I'm just going to listen and see. Nope, it sounds fine to me. It's not stopping and starting. Okay, so I'm going to go through what a warm, cooked, and moist diet might look like for depending on what kind of foods you put in your body. Cooked doesn't have to mean cooked to oblivion, right? But cooking actually is part of the warming process of the foods. So cooking foods could be putting it in the oven, putting it in an air fryer. It could be putting it it could be putting it in the microwave. Please, I would avoid using the microwave at all costs if you can. It's not a great way to cook. But it's that first process of cooking. And so if we think about this process as like your body, your spleen energy is kind of heating, I'll just jump back to the red, is kind of heating the foods, right? To the more warm the food is, the less job that your spleen has to do to heat it. So that's the reason why. It's not just like, oh, I've made up this rule for myself. It's not. It's based in physiology of how your body works in Chinese medicine. So when we put warm foods in and cooked foods in, it takes up less energy just to do that job of digestion, just to do that. And we call that job of digestion the separation of the pure and impure. Or if you are a TCM student, they'd call that transformation and transportation. So this is really getting into like student level stuff, like what you'd learn first year Chinese medicine school. They call that transformation and transportation, right? And what that job is like literally making a soup. So if you were to cook a soup on the stove, the steaming up process, right? Some of those nutrients are kind of steamed up. And that's like your stomach is literally doing that. It's steaming that up. And it's kind of, bubble, toil and trouble kind of thing in there. So you're trying to do that on the stove. Now, does that mean you have to cook everything to oblivion? Like cook it till there's nothing left of it? No. It could be literally steaming it. Keeping the lid on stuff means that as the things are cooked, moisture comes back down and nutrients are retained in the cooking in that process. A general healthy diet involves different levels of cooking. So some things can be, almost near on raw, and some things could be very, very cooked, like stewed and souped kind of things. What type of cooking you should do also depends on the season that you're in. When it's winter, like if you're in the US, UK now, or Europe or something, then you'd want to be cooking your food a lot. Whereas if you're in Australia, like me, it's the height of summer right now, like pretty much just the peak of summer. You don't need to cook everything to oblivion, and you certainly don't need to cook every single thing. But this is a majority of stuff. So on average, or you should have mostly. So I'm going to use that word because Chinese medicine loves that word. Mostly. It doesn't mean every time. Not every single thing. So can you have a salad here or there? Yeah. If you're sick, if you're unwell, if you have these symptoms that we said here, the bloating, gassy, nausea, bowel movements, constipation, diarrhea, something like that, then you would want to adhere to this as much as possible, and have very little cold, dry and raw. And you might do that for a season and see how you feel. If you feel better, stay on that diet, right? Great. If it's working for you, good, do more of that. So that's the first thing, is cooking. And different processes of cooking we can use could include things like sauteing. So you have moisture in moisture infusing kinds of cooking methods. So these are things that are boiling, or the old-fashioned word is, another word is broiling, B-R-O-I-L. I think that's using boiling with oil. Like you've got sauteing, you've got stewing, you've got souping or soups, right? So those things all put moisture in. That's better because, again, we go back to our list here. We want warm, moist and cooked, not warm, dry and cooked. And things that tend to dry foods out are these methods: baking. So that would be like, making a biscuit, making a cake, things like that. And if you've ever cooked or eaten a biscuit and a cake, the difference between a biscuit and a cake is there's less moisture in the recipe in a biscuit, and it's cooked for longer. It's not all soft and squishy. It's hard and crunchy. Okay. So baking, we've got I didn't put steaming in here. That's another kind of, another method of cooking. So we've got baking. A very popular method at the moment is air frying. And air frying is super drying, okay? Because you've got frying, but lots of air. So when you're forcing lots of air over the food, it's going to dry it out. And that makes the food taste really delicious, of course. Like, I have an air fryer, and my favorite thing to put in the air fryer, especially since I've been doing carnivore diet, is bacon. And it really crisps it up, and it makes it into like a little crispy bacon chip. Isn't that delicious to think about? But anything you put in that air fryer, it dries, right? It really, really dries it out. So that's not, you can't live on that food all the time. It's not a good idea to have a lot of dry food. And like frying. And again, there's heaps of different frying methods. There's deep frying, which is in oil. There's like barbecuing, and there's like frying something on a pan, that kinds of stuff. So those methods tend to be, they don't. I'm not saying they are dry, but they're drying. They're. This is putting moisture in, and this is moisture's definitely going out of that food when you cook it. Again, what method's appropriate depends on what you're starting with. So if you start with a steak that's a raw steak, there's a ton of moisture, not to get a bit gross, but obviously the blood and everything that's inside that steak, the liquid, the juice, it can withstand a bit of frying on each side, right? But you don't want to cook it completely so that all the moisture's completely cooked out of that thing. Whereas if you start with something that's already a dry kind of a food, and then you use a cooking method that dries it even more, that's kind of when it can become not great for us and increase this dryness that we have from foods. So choose cooking methods that suit you. But like if you're a beginner at this, that's really where this video is pitched. You can just start with thinking about that more. Think, how can I have more cooked foods? What ways can I cook? Like I often sort of advise people when they're getting started with this, my students, my patients, and people that ask me these questions on the channel. If you make it really complicated, you probably won't do anything at all, and it'll just continuously be complicated. And I don't think that's a great way to live, right? Like you think, oh, I have to have everything stewed because that's the best way for me, or I have to have everything boiled, and oh no, I can never do one of these other methods or something like that. What we want to do is move from wherever you are now into a state of better health. So doing these things that are better for your health. So if you're not cooking your food, more cooking rather than less cooking in your food is a good idea, right? So I know I'm talking about this topic at the moment. If people are jumping in the chat and they'd like to ask a question, you can certainly ask a question. So feel free to do that while I talk about this topic. I'm pretty much using this as a way to test this system with the stream. I was going to record this video as just a pre-recorded video, and I thought I'll do it as a live stream so that I can test this system at the same time. I'm literally not even expecting anyone to come in the stream because it's not the right time for people, I think. But if you are here, I'm happy to answer a question if you have one. So we're talking about 3 things you must do with your diet no matter what. If you want to be healthy in Chinese medicine. So cooked is a big one. Now, this is for the when I say averages, you might not fit into that category, so it can be a bit redundant to say that, but on average, most people do cook their food. Like it's very, it's not that common to find people that just naturally gravitate towards raw foods. People that do raw food kind of exclusive diets tend to have gotten there because they're aiming for health. They're doing that out of trying to be healthy. And sometimes this can be a bit of a bombshell. You're like, oh no, I thought I was being healthy. I want to do the right thing for my body, and now you're saying, don't do that. Don't have a lot of raw stuff. So what's the balance there? Okay, if you're in summertime, you could have some raw, but you want to try to have cooked foods with the raw. So like have some cooked protein, meat if you're not a vegetarian or vegan, that's great, with your salad, with your veggies, with those things. Try steaming things or lightly cooking stuff, and experiment with that stuff if that's possible for you. There are some foods that you don't want to cook too much because they lose nutrients out of them when you cook them a lot, or maybe the flavor changes and things like that, and that's okay. But en masse, in general, you want to have mostly cooked. Now, if you've got a very weak spleen, or you've spleen chi, or you have these symptoms, bloating, gassy, nausea, bowel movements are not great. Another symptom that's part of this, but it's not the definitive symptom, is often tiredness. Yep, so you feel sick after eating or not like eating that much, but often feel tired. Like I could easily have a lie down. Feeling heavy with the tiredness is part of that stuff. And that heaviness in Chinese medicine, worst spelling ever, is part of dampness. And how do we get dampness? Essentially, if this system here isn't working properly, like your spleen and your stomach, the earth element aren't doing their job properly. They don't form and transport pure and impure. There's literally more impure, and that is damp. So if you're left with a sluggish, without much pure to steam upwardly, this is metaphorical concepts, okay? But if you're left with that, that's literally dampness. And dampness is foggy headedness, it's cloudy headedness, it's heaviness, it's lethargic, it's all those kinds of things. And often that will be associated with after eating, right? Especially that after that lunchtime sort of a meal. So we're talking about 3 things you've got to do no matter what in your diet. Firstly, cooking, moist foods, warm foods. So for someone who eats a lot of smoothies, and you might do this out of convenience, one of the things I tell my patients, if that's the case, maybe try making a big soup at the start of the week. Bone broth is awesome. Obviously, if you're a vegan, you're not going to be eating that, but you could add the bone broth or chicken stock into it, and use that as a way to like put that soup into a flask and take that with you rather than a big smoothie. So some people do smoothies out of convenience and needing to save time, and I totally get that. Like that's life. That's part of it. A life hack that I would tell you, which is great, is hard-boiled eggs. So you cook up 2 or 3 hard-boiled eggs in the morning, and then I just wrap mine in a if I'm in a hurry and I've just cooked it up, I just wrap it in a tea towel, put it in my handbag, and then I've got a hard-boiled egg snack for when I'm first hungry in the morning. And then that first thing you're having in the morning is protein, especially if you're not a big breakfast eater, and it gets to sort of mid-morning and you're like going to the cafe thinking, oh, what should I eat? And all I've got is sort of ham and cheese croissants. Like that's one of the worst things you could have. Now, I'm not saying that to blame anyone. Like almost the last half of last year, that's what I was having when I was at my teaching job. I just got into a habit of not doing my hard-boiled eggs, and then I would be hungry, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be here for the next like 6 hours. I'm going to have to eat something, and didn't plan ahead. And then next thing you know, you're eating ham and cheese croissants. That's not great. So hard-boiled eggs, that's that's for free. That's a really good hack that you can do. So how do we incorporate the moist foods? Actually, that is mostly through these cooking methods, right? Now, you can drink more moisture. You could just literally drink water. That's the best moistening thing you can have. Like water is pure yin. So in Chinese medicine, we have yin and yang as concepts. And when we think about we want to moisten our body, we need yang to transform this water. So you may have heard from other Chinese medicine practitioners may have told you, drink warm water or don't drink cold water. I'm not a big proponent of forcing myself to drink warm water, but I would not drink cold water out of the fridge. Sometimes, occasionally, like it's really hot, you're outside, you're at a party or something, you drink some soda water that's cold, okay? It's not going to kill you. But we're talking about everyday practices, habits and things like that. So just tap water, as in tap temperature, I should say, like room temperature water. I think most people know you don't want to drink water straight out of the tap if you can help that. If that's within your means, get a water filter, reverse osmosis, something like that. I buy rainwater and I just drink the rainwater, and it's awesome. I love it. So we're thinking about warm, cooked and moist. Now, how do we do warm? Well, the food could be warm just from the fact that you've cooked it and you've cooked it straight away. or it's been cooked and you've reheated it. That's one concept of warm. But the other concept of warm is actually what we call the thermal natures of food. So foods originally, we'll just say warm here. Oh, and speaking of warm, my iPad's getting very warm. this the screen that I'm touching here to draw. Maybe it's all the things I've got plugged into it to make the stream go. Anyway, so foods have a nature of warm. Now, think of a food that's not warm. It's cold or cool. So you have things that are hot, warm, cool, and cold. So we could put all the foods on a spectrum of their thermal natures, and this is the inherent nature of the food. Yeah, I've done it again. I'm testing this whole thing out. I'm going to have to, undo that. Just make this a bit smaller. If people have a question about Chinese medicine, you're welcome to put that in the chat. There we go. That fits in there properly, I think. There we go. So you can guess a food that's warm. Guess a food that's hot. Okay, a food that's hot is chili. Its nature is hot. If I get a chili and I freeze a chili, that you can't even read that. I've written it so badly. It's still hot. A chili does not stop being hot, really. Like, we can try and moderate things effects. We can make them hotter or cooler, warmer or cooler, I guess, but we can't sometimes change the inherent nature of a food. So something that's cold or cool, particularly cold, would probably be cucumber. I'm just aware that this iPad is cutting out at this here. Right, I'm going to draw the line there. So cucumber is cold. And interestingly enough, right, so Chinese medicine, diet therapy is part of Chinese medicine, but it's also just part of Chinese culture. And I remember once I went to China and I saw a dish being served with cucumber that was cut about that thick, so big chunks of cucumber, and it was all fried in garlic, like fried with a garlicky sauce over the top of it. Now, as an Australian, a Western Australian, no pun intended. I do live in Western Australia, but as in a Westerner, as a white as Westerner, English descent, I've never seen a cucumber cooked, ever. I would never think of that. Like, we have sort of Earl of Sandwich cucumber sandwiches. That would be something quite useful you could do with a cucumber. But for the most part, cucumbers are put in salads, right? That's how we think of cucumbers. Same as like some foods, like I was really surprised to learn that in the US, they don't eat pumpkin. I'll write that one down in case people kind of can't. Pumpkin as a savoury food, right? In Australia, we know about pumpkin pie, and I have made a pumpkin pie, and my goodness, that was one of the most delicious foods I've ever had. It was so yum. But that's not the general way we have pumpkin. Pumpkin is a savoury food. We use it in pumpkin soup. We make pumpkin, and maybe you call it squash there or something like that as well, like those kinds of things. And speaking of pumpkin, where would that fit? I'm just going to resize this, make it small enough to fit. It'd fit in sort of the warm category, right? So it's on the warmer side, or what we would say is neutral. So I probably would put pumpkin. Oops, I'm messing that up there. Pumpkin into the neutral section, right? So often things that are warm or hot are actually herbs and spices, and we often use those things to cook with, right? Herbs and spices we add into foods. So things like cinnamon, ginger, garlic. So think about that. They put garlic with cucumber to sort of, and does that change the cucumber to make it no longer cold? It's probably cool. It's probably not cold anymore. One of the only fruits that is warm is lychee, and probably lychee's between hot and warm. And then most of your fruits are going to fit into cold and cool. So banana isn't really that cold, but many plums, apple, like green apple, tend to fit into. I'm just making sure I don't color outside the lines here with what people can see. And so on and so forth. I'm not going to put every single fruit and food on this chart, but there is a nature. Foods do have natures. Now, if you're interested in learning about that, the book that would probably teach you the most about that, that's simple, is called The Tao of Healthy Eating, the TAO. I've written it with DAO, but it's the same concept, and they've put the Tao of Healthy Eating, and that's by Bob Floors. It's an easy to find book. It's been in print a long time. It goes through most of the foods, not all of the foods, and gives you like what we would call their thermal natures. So this is thermal natures of foods. So that is a unique concept to Chinese medicine, right? I don't think Western nutrition thinks about that in foods. That's what makes Chinese diet therapy one of the things that makes it unique is how we think about the concepts of food. So getting back to these 3 things that you must do with your diet to maintain health or keep health or get health, no matter what, right? Vegetarian, vegan, eat Mediterranean diet, eat whatever you have, whatever kind of diet. You should do these things. You should have mostly warm, mostly cooked, and mostly moist foods, and try to stay away or limit the cold, dry, and raw foods. So another thing that makes foods warm, so we've talked about this, part of the things that makes a food warm is how much yang a food contains. Right? So foods that have a lot of yang will be warmer and hotter foods, as well as herbs. So a good example would be fresh ginger is warm, and dried ginger is hot. Now, dried ginger is used in Chinese herbal medicine. It's not used much in cooking or non-treatment of, like just preventative care, right? Whereas fresh ginger is used a lot in preventative care. Like it's both of them are great to use, and you can just make dried ginger out of fresh ginger and dry it yourself and keep it there. But it's the example that it's the same food, but what's been done to it's literally concentrated the properties of it. It's become hotter, and so dried ginger has become then a yang tonic, whereas fresh ginger isn't a yang tonic. It's more just like supporting the spleen and stomach. Fresh ginger is one of the main things that kind of supports this function here, right? This earth function. It's really good at doing that. So the next thing that comes to mind about this is meat, right? So meat is warm. There's no meat that's not in some way warm. The younger the meats, the more yang it has. So, for instance, lamb is the most hot of the hotter considered a hotter kind of meat. And I could speak for a little bit longer about this. If people want to know about this stuff, maybe I'll do a different video on it. But I think this is one of the places where Chinese medicine diet therapy has been misunderstood by practitioners, in cahoots with misunderstanding heat in Chinese medicine. So, for instance, many patients who are deficient, we'll come back to this little picture here. So if this isn't working properly, the spleen and stomach aren't digesting, transforming properly, then the pure and impure aren't separated properly. And the result of that is spleen qi deficiency, which essentially is what I've written up here, right? So person's got tiredness, they feel heavy. This is kind of the spleen qi deficiency leading to dampness. It's their bowels will be on the looser side. So the more deficient you are, the more looser it will be. And then when that's been going on for a long time, over time, it often can lead to people getting a heat kind of rising of some sort. So especially for women, because as we get older, our hormones and things change, and that then can lead you to a state of menopause, and that it could be a menopausal hot flush, but it could just be like as if a menopausal hot flush, but you're not necessarily in menopause. So I'm not saying it is a menopausal thing. As we age, our yang is naturally declining. So I'm going to stick that over here somewhere. Maybe make a new page. So let's say when you're born, you're a nice little child with tons of yang, right? So if you have, let's just draw it like this on a scale. The general premise of Chinese medicine. Oops, I'll have to make this smaller because I know you can't see all of that. Probably up to there. Right? The general premise of Chinese medicine is that a human being should live 100 healthy years. Okay? When you're born, you're just a little baby with, there's your little arms and your little legs, and you've got a smile on your face, and you've got tons of yang. Okay? And I'm not going to draw an old person because I don't feel confident in my drawing skills here. So as we age, this is our yang. Our yang literally declines. That's just natural. It's going to happen. We can't avoid that. We can't. Otherwise, you would live forever. Now, for some people, this is normal, right? But for some people, it might decline earlier than others. They might be good here for a while, and then they suddenly go, oh shit, my health's not doing very well. And then they think, oh, I'm going to do some changes. And then they get on sort of a natural trajectory from then. Excuse me, that horrible coughing. I don't know if you can see this color that well. I'll do it in this darker pink. So let's say something, you just live a good life in terms of a bit too much of a party life, right? In your teenage years. And you get to about 40 years old and you think, shit, I can't live like that anymore. And maybe you're watching a video like this. You think I've got to change my ways or help myself, or I've got all this gassy bloating, diarrhea, things that I didn't have before. And you do make some changes. So instead of sort of dying early and of some kind of disease that could maybe be prevented, you still live on, and you might live to 100, but maybe not as, you just don't have that resource, that same vitality. You know, that can happen. Or you could kind of your life might be 80 years or something like that, right? You get the idea. But in general, yang is going to decline. So what we want to do with our diet is support the yang. So it would make sense that you would have more foods that support yang. What supports yang? Things that are warm. Things that are warm have a thermal nature of warm. And the highest things that have a thermal nature of being warm is meat. And the other part that also makes meat really great is it has more yang because it's come from an animal, which is a life force. So you're consuming a life force. So you're literally increasing your life force by consuming another life force. Vegans are not going to like this this episode. Beep, the stream just went down. No, I don't think I have any vegans on this channel. But that's just that's just life. That's it. That's the truth, right? Well, on this channel, we don't sugarcoat that. So that's one thing that meat has that other foods don't have. Now, some obviously we went through some thermal natures of things here. Some things there are for other foods. Most of your root vegetables are in the thermal nature of neutral, which means they're neither hot nor cold, and that's good. It's not a bad thing for you. So you want to stick on things that are on this side of the spectrum. So Chinese medicine doesn't really care that much for raw fruit as a diet, right? As a general dietary product, they wouldn't really think that you should eat much raw fruit. It's not and it's not a requirement for daily life. It's kind of like not necessary to have that. Okay, and certainly that anything that has that thermal nature of being cool, and you're eating it raw, it doubles its effect in terms of its detrimental effect. So fruit ticks the box of cold, and it's often raw. Okay, so its nature is cold or on the cool side, and you're eating it raw. So that's kind of a two no-nos in the same food. So the other foods that generally support the spleen and stomach, that are good, solid supporting foods that are kind of supporting yang, are your root vegetables. So not too many carbs, right? Like I'm not a big advocate of carbs. And again, I'm not giving people individual advice. Like if you need to lose weight, that's the worst foods you could eat, right? That's not going to be helpful for you. If you've already got illness, maybe that's not a great food for you. But it's certainly not as bad if we're thinking about I'm not well and I'm trying to move from where I am now to better health. Eating pumpkin, sweet potato, squash, these kinds of foods are heaps better than packets of foods, anything from a packet. They're heaps better than pasta. Like natural vegetables in their natural state are much better for you than packet foods. So some of this stuff is moving from what we had and what we thought was okay or what you were surviving on, to what you can thrive on, right? So we want to try to move from things that are like if you're in a survive to thriving, right? How can we do better? How can we be better? And if you have any of these symptoms, like that's not something that you should have to live your life with. Like there's something wrong if you've got those symptoms. That's not considered normal. It's not normal to live with feeling gassy all the time. It's not normal to be bloated all the time. It's not normal to have nausea. It's not normal to have diarrhea all the time. These kinds of things. So I'm kind of getting to the end of this little topic. If people have a question, I can see some people have come into the stream. You're welcome to ask your question. It doesn't have to be on this topic, just anything to do with Chinese medicine. That's totally fine. Like I said, I kind of jumped on here to do something that I was gonna do this anyway. But I thought I would do it. I thought I would do it in the stream so that I could test a few. Oh, what's happened there? Test a few things out. And I think we've done that, so that's good. I know that this is going to work. So the main focus of the diet, the three things you must do no matter what, is warm, moist and cooked foods. Stay away from cold, dry and raw foods. So in Chinese medicine, the saying is eat mostly cooked foods most of the time. So this can easily be incorporated into most diets, right? So even if you're following, like I have some patients on low FODMAP diet, or, certain, ordering of foods diets, or you're following a carnivore diet, it's obviously going to be mostly, I can't imagine there being much raw, it is as its entirety, be a bit yuck. But in general, that fits into this very, very well, right? But also, like if you're you're trying to stay in ketosis or calorie controlling or anything like that, you can still do all of that and then try to fit this into it. So, yeah, if patients come to me and they're already doing well on a particular diet, or they've just invested money or something into seeing a particular practitioner, I don't want to mess around with what they're doing too much, because that's as in diet practitioner I'm talking about, and change all of that. But I do want to let them know about these things, because they're not going to mess around with like the macros or the micros of the foods that you're actually having for the most cases, right? If you are a person who loves smoothies, I'll give you this one little tip. And you are like, no, Marie, I'm never going to stop having my smoothies. I love those smoothies. You could have some ginger with the smoothie, okay? Fresh ginger. You could put that in there. And even if you're happy, healthy, and thriving, and you love the smoothies, in general, it depends on the state of where you are in your life. So you're born and you might be 20 years old, and you've got to this point of life, and you're having a lot of smoothies here. Well, naturally, you've got much more yang at 20 years old here than you would in this section of life, from sort of 70 or 80 years old. So you've got more of a buffer zone to deal with any detriment. Same as, it's not just smoothies, it's the same as like alcohol drinking or detrimental drug use or things like that, right? Like your body is super, super resilient when you're younger because you've got lots of yang. And that is the essence of life, right? That's what I do. My job as a Chinese medicine practitioner is a generator of yang for people. That's kind of what we're trying to do with Chinese herbs, is basically revive yang, tonify yang, keep yang from getting too weak. If yang is strong enough, everything else in your body is going to function how it should function, pretty much. So that's something to keep in mind, right? But so let's say you do love your smoothies and you're thriving and you're thinking, no, there's no reason for me to change that. Well, just trust me on this. Like, don't have too many of them, and if you can, and add that ginger into it, because the ginger kind of just helps to support this function here, this stomach as the cooking pot on the stove, and that spleen doing its job of digesting, separating pure and impure. So I hope this episode has been useful and helpful to you. And if you do have a question, you're welcome to pop your questions into the comments. If you have I'd love to take questions from people in the chat now, if there are any, and that's totally fine. It doesn't have to be related to this, or maybe questions about this. If people have those, that's fine. Let me know where you're streaming in from, where you're coming in from. I am trying to find a good time for me and everyone else. So it's about 2:54 in Perth right now, where I am, and this is a great time for me because I've done my patients for the day and I'm kind of like in the mood for it. But most of the people who watch this channel are not on the channel now, so I totally understand that. If you have an idea for a video or something else you'd like me to talk about for another time, those questions are kind of welcome. Yep. So I have this other question that I was going to go and answer, because it kind of relates to what we're just talking about right now as well. So I'll read this in a sec. So this is from, I don't know if I can read the name as in pronounce it properly. Proji Andanshudo. Okay, that's my best guess at that. So this was on one of my videos about why don't eat raw foods. It wasn't called that exactly. It was something like that. Why raw foods aren't great for you, something like that. So this person says, a female, I can see from the picture. Hi, I just found your channel. I like it a lot. That's great. Thank you. I seem to have a low spleen qi level. I heard from a Russian Chinese doctor that sweet flavored food feeds the spleen. For example, pumpkin, sweet potato, some of whole grains, and corn porridge, etc. That all of this is good for the spleen. Of course not sugar. That's bad for everything. Okay, what do you think about this? Thank you for your work. So I do have a lot to say about this kind of concept, right? So what we were just talking about with the spleen qi, the stomach and the spleen, like let's say the cooking pot on the stove. So the spleen is here, the stomach is here, right? There's a few ways that Chinese medicine classifies foods. I talked before about thermal natures of foods, right? So here we've got hot foods, warm foods, cool foods, cold foods. So all of these things this person's asking about fit into the thermal nature of neutral. Okay, so that doesn't mean that they're not good for us, things that are not on the good side are all here, all on this side, right? So we want to stay away from cool and cold stuff, and things that are neutral and warm. So neutral things can actually be turned cool, and they can be turned to warm. How would we do that? A good example is if we cook pumpkin with cinnamon and ginger. Well, there you've got your delicious pumpkin pie. Now you don't want to have sugar in that, but if you did have it, that wouldn't be great. But that would often, let's say a soup would have some kind of herbs in there which will warm it. So you can turn those thermal things that are neutral into warm foods. So they can be good. There's a few things when I try to give diet advice to people about that I think about. One is what you're coming from and what you're going to, okay? And what we're trying to advise people in is the optimal. But many people are not ready to get there yet, or they're not able to get there yet for many reasons. Like they might not realize that that's what they want, that they might not think that that's what they need to do. They might not be convinced that that's right yet. They might see that as too encumbering for them to make those changes or things like that. That doesn't stop me from sort of advising people what's optimal. Okay, but there can be stuff that is towards that optimal. So I think I mentioned this just before about with the thinking about the like what's right for you, and thinking about, especially when I was mentioning things about meats and the decline of yang as you get older. If your body's already in a state of health, and by that I mean it's not yang deficient, you don't have any of these kinds of symptoms here, and you're not overweight, so you're at a healthy weight, or you're underweight, you need to put on weight, then some of those carbohydrates can be useful for us. As in they can support they will support that spleen and stomach. For some people, they can't moderate their eating when they eat a lot of carbohydrates. Okay, like being in a ketogenic diet means that you generally won't overeat. Once you're in that state of ketosis, you won't get into a situation where it's very hard to get into a situation where you're eating too much food, overeating food. So it's carbs that make us eat those foods. But it's also carbohydrates that kind of have a relaxing effect on our body, like that's literally that moderating effect, right? Not moderating as in, well, it's kind of evening out. And for some people, they feel very relaxed in terms of helping them to sleep at night if they have a carbohydrate meal at night. So if you've ever done a diet of where you've been in ketosis, or fasting in the morning, what they call intermittent fasting, so you might not eat any food until 12 o'clock or something like that, or 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever it is, then you might feel incredibly energized until you eat that meal. And then once you eat that meal, you're like, oh, I actually feel sluggish. I've almost some of these symptoms here of this, maybe not nausea, but you feel tired, you feel heavy. So that's telling us that those foods are initiating some form of dampness, right? Some form of that sluggishness. Now, for some people that can help them fall asleep, and it's not enough to then make you wake up and still feel bloated and sluggish because you've only had a tiny bit of it. So that's kind of my take on these foods, right? Like traditionally, if you look up these foods in a Chinese medicine textbook, they're going to say, yep, they tonify the spleen qi and they're good for you. And that's true, right? They do tonify the spleen qi, but the sweet flavor is also tonifying the spleen qi. And a super tonified spleen qi, or an over tonified spleen qi, let's say, I don't know whether we'd say over tonified, but a super abundant situation there is actually dampness and overweight, because It's growing the earth. Like let's say they allow the earth to grow. And if the earth grows too much, the person would be fat. That's what carbs do. So these foods that this person's mentioning here are carbs. Now, it's in cahoots with what else you're eating. So if you have plenty of meat, lots of healthy meat protein, and you're not having too many grains, this would probably be fine. Sweet potato, pumpkin, this kind of stuff. Like they're having, whole grain, some whole grains and corn porridge and stuff like that. Right, whole grains means you're eating, like you're making, like I'm assuming because you said Russian Chinese doctor, maybe you're in Russia. Borscht is, and there's another thing that's, I think is it borscht, that's like the wheaty porridge, that kind of stuff. Maybe borscht is the beetroot soup, but something like that, like these kind of nourishing porridges. In Chinese medicine, in Chinese culture, they're consumed in very small amounts. It's not like a massive bowl of porridge. That's another video for another day, I think, the volume of these foods. But for some people, they find the volume, to actually moderate that volume, very, very hard. And if that's the case, you might be better off on just missing those foods out and being on a very meat-based kind of high protein diet, right? Eggs, meat, that kind of stuff. If you can moderate that, and you might use higher protein stuff first thing in the day to be more productive and more sharp and more clear thinking, and then have carbohydrate like these sort of foods in the evening. I don't think these sort of foods are great to have first thing in the morning. I know many countries have traditionally had porridge and stuff like that for breakfast, but you will tend to get more hungry through the day, and you'll tend to be less productive, less your thinking will be less sharp than if you had a protein only kind of breakfast. So if your spleen's already struggling to work, and it's really struggling to kind of do its job here, then you want to give it things that it likes. So that, as long as those foods there are warm cooked and moist, which they would be, I don't think you're going to be eating a raw pumpkin, and they fit into this neutral category of foods here, these root vegetables. They tend to nourish the spleen and look after the spleen. Too much sweet is said to overwhelm the spleen, and this is where the moderation of sweet comes in. So all of those flavors here, in terms of these foods you've just told me, these root vegetables, their nature is sweet, and that sweetness turns into sugar, right? Because that carb, it turns into sugar. And when you've got sugar in your body, or carbs, when you eat carbs or sugar, you have to produce insulin, and then you get all of the response going on in your body from that. Versus if you don't have all that flooding around your body, that's a state of ketosis, and you're generally going to be sharper and able to kind of function better from that perspective in your mental functions. So a lot of what Chinese medicine suggests is good or not good, for you personally, might be related to how much you have of it and what other things you're having, right? Rather than just, like, I'm very wary of saying, oh yeah, pumpkins are good, and then people think, oh, I'll just have pumpkin, I'll just have like pumpkin soup, pumpkin pie, everything, or that this is the next superfood or so great for you, right? And another thing is, when are these things in season? They're in season in the winter time, which is now if you're in Russia or UK or US, and they're not in season in summer. So it makes sense that you would have these cooked, heartier things in the season where you're going to be in a much more restful state, which is in winter, the time of yin. Okay, so I hope that explanation has been useful and helpful. I'm going to log off from this live stream now. Thanks everyone who's joined in as a bit of a test. And if you're watching this later on, then if you have a question, you can always put it in the chat, in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. That'll be really great. All right, thank you.